The time crystal. Picture a pendulum inside a vacuum chamber. You pull it back, let it go, and it swings. According to every law of classical mechanics, it will eventually stop. Entropy demands it. Energy must dissipate. Friction, however microscopic, must inevitably win. But what if you looked at a structure that doesn't just resist entropy, but completely ignores it? Imagine holding an object that shifts and changes in a constant, rhythmic cycle, never losing a fraction of a percent of its energy, and never requiring a power source. You would assume it's a perpetual motion machine, an impossibility that violates the very foundation of thermodynamics. But you wouldn't just be looking at a trick of engineering. You would be looking at an entirely new phase of reality. In 2021, deep within the architecture of Google's Sycamore quantum computer, researchers successfully synthesized something that shouldn't exist: a time crystal. Until this moment, our understanding of matter, liquids, solids, gases, crystals, was defined by how atoms arranged themselves across physical space. A diamond's atoms are locked in a rigid spatial lattice, but a time crystal operates on an entirely different axis. Its atoms are arranged in a repeating pattern not through space, but through time. It is a system that constantly shifts its structure, moving between states in an infinite loop, without ever absorbing energy from its environment and without ever bleeding energy out. It is motion without exhaustion. It is change without thermodynamic consequence. The implications are severely disorienting. If an object can cycle continuously without generating heat or losing momentum, it means the unbreakable rule of entropy, the law that dictates the inevitable decay of all things, has a loophole. The time crystal doesn't just survive in this loophole, it thrives in it. Consider what this means for your own perception of existence. You experience your life as a linear degradation. You age. Your memories fade. Everything you build eventually crumbles, because your entire biology is enslaved to the arrow of time and the laws of thermodynamics. But the existence of the time crystal suggests that time itself might not be the unstoppable, destructive current you perceive it to be. If atoms can be locked into a permanent, repeating structure through time, what does that say about the finality of your own timeline? You assume the past is gone and the future is unwritten. But what if time is just another dimension that can be crystallized, trapped in an eternal, unbreakable loop? You might just be experiencing one fragment of a pattern that repeats forever, unaware of the vast, unchanging architecture you are trapped within. But if the fundamental structure of time can be locked into a permanent, unending cycle, what happens when the very fabric of the space holding those crystals turns out to be inherently, catastrophically unstable? The false vacuum. You are standing on what feels like solid ground. It holds the weight of your house, your city, your entire civilization. You trust it completely because it has never failed you. But imagine discovering that the ground beneath you isn't rock or soil at all. It is a thin sheet of brittle ice, suspended over a bottomless, lightless void. You don't know when the ice will crack or what might cause it, but you know that when it does, the collapse will be instantaneous and absolute. This is not a metaphor for societal collapse. It is a highly probable description of the physical universe you are currently occupying. Theoretical physicists, examining the mass of the Higgs boson, have uncovered a terrifying mathematical probability regarding the stability of our reality. In physics, every system naturally seeks its lowest possible energy state, known as a true vacuum. For decades, it was assumed that our universe had already settled into this baseline state. But recent calculations suggest something profoundly unsettling. Our universe might merely be sitting in a false vacuum. We are likely existing in a temporary, localized valley of stability, elevated far above the true baseline of reality. If a single point anywhere in the cosmos manages to drop down into the true vacuum, perhaps triggered by a high-energy quantum event or simply a random quantum tunneling fluctuation, it would create a bubble of true reality. And this bubble would begin to expand outward in all directions at the exact speed of light. Because it moves at light speed, you would never see it coming. As the bubble's boundary washes over our solar system, it wouldn't just incinerate us. It would instantly rewrite the laws of physics. Matter as we know it would cease to cohere. The chemical bonds holding your DNA together would dissolve. The very forces of gravity and electromagnetism would be fundamentally altered, erasing everything within the bubble from existence. Every choice you have ever made, every relationship you have nurtured, every historical milestone humanity has achieved, rests on a fragile, temporary mathematical coincidence. You live your life assuming permanence. You save money for a future decades away. You build monuments meant to last millennia, all under the unspoken assumption that the stage upon which you act will remain stable. But the false vacuum theory suggests that everything you are, and everything that has ever been, could be annihilated without a fraction of a second of warning. You are a temporary fluctuation in a system that is quietly waiting to correct itself. This suggests a fragility to our cosmic environment that is almost impossible to fully internalize. Yet you don't even need to look out into the deep cosmos to find physics collapsing into the impossible. You only need a simple jar of liquid, a sound wave, and a completely unexplained anomaly. Star in a jar. You are standing in a darkened laboratory. On the table in front of you sits a simple, spherical glass flask filled with water. There are no lasers, no radioactive materials, no complex quantum containment fields. There is only the liquid, and a device designed to pump high-frequency sound waves directly into the center of the flask. You might expect the water to vibrate, or perhaps to heat up slightly from the acoustic friction. But as you watch, a tiny, glowing point of blue light appears suspended in the center of the water. It pulses with a steady, eerie rhythm, a microscopic beacon shining out from the dark. You are witnessing something that defies every intuitive understanding you have about the relationship between sound, liquid, and heat. This phenomenon is known as sonoluminescence. When those intense sound waves travel through the liquid, they create areas of extreme low pressure, tearing the water apart to form a microscopic bubble. But the bubble is instantly crushed by the surrounding high pressure. As it collapses inward on itself at supersonic speeds, the violence of the implosion generates a shockwave so intense that it emits a sharp burst of visible light. The sheer kinetic force concentrated into that microscopic void produces temperatures that defy belief. For a fraction of a second, the interior of that collapsing bubble reaches tens of thousands of degrees. It becomes hotter than the surface of our sun. Researchers at the University of Cologne and laboratories around the world have measured and verified this extreme thermal spike. Yet, despite decades of observation, the exact mechanism by which a simple acoustic shockwave translates into stellar heat remains a deeply contested mystery. We can trigger it, we can measure it, but we cannot fully explain how the basic laws of fluid dynamics allow for such an extreme concentration of energy. You walk through a world governed by cause and effect, where you believe you understand the basic rules of engagement. You know that fire burns, ice freezes, and sound is just a vibration you hear. You construct your reality based on these reliable, predictable boundaries. Yet something as mundane as sound hitting water can summon a microscopic star out of nothingness. It reveals that the ordinary environment you interact with every single day is capable of extreme, reality-breaking violence under the right conditions. If the simple act of a bubble collapsing can generate the heat of a sun, how much of your daily reality is just hiding its true, volatile nature from you? You assume you are safe because things look familiar, but the familiar is just a mask. The creation of a miniature star from nothing but sound and water proves that extreme, reality-breaking forces can hide in the most unassuming places. But this microscopic violence is nothing compared to the scale of the next anomaly. A force that doesn't just bend the rules of the universe, it actively rewrites the history of everything it touches. The Ennean particles. Picture yourself holding two perfectly identical marbles, one in your left hand and one in your right. If you close your eyes and someone swaps their positions, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference when you open them again. In a standard three-dimensional world, identical objects that are swapped remain fundamentally identical. The universe doesn't care that they moved. It only cares that their current state looks the same. But imagine if, when those marbles were swapped, their internal structure permanently altered. Imagine if the simple act of crossing their paths left an indelible, measurable mark on their physical state, as if the objects actually remembered being moved. In your everyday reality, this sounds like an impossible magic trick. But when we investigate the deepest quantum layers of our universe, this isn't just a hypothetical thought experiment. It is a newly verified, reality-breaking law of physics. In 2020, researchers at Purdue University physically confirmed the existence of something that had only existed in abstract mathematics for over 40 years. Anyons. These are a bizarre class of quasi-particles that only exist in 2 dimensions. But their most profound feature isn't their flatness. It's their memory. When you take 2 Ennean particles and swap their positions, their underlying quantum state undergoes a fundamental, permanent shift. Unlike every other particle in the 3-dimensional universe, like electrons or photons, which are completely interchangeable and retain absolutely no history of their spatial movements, Enneans record their topological past. They literally remember the exact path they took to arrive at their current location. Swapping them entirely breaks the absolute symmetry rules that govern 3D physics. It introduces a physical ledger of history directly into the fundamental fabric of matter. It proves that at the quantum level, the journey is permanently recorded in the destination. Consider how deeply this disrupts your understanding of your own physical form. You believe your past is a strictly subjective experience, a sequence of electrical signals stored delicately in the neurons of your brain, while the physical matter making up your body is just a collection of interchangeable, forgetful atoms. You assume that the carbon in your bones is entirely identical to the carbon in a piece of coal, entirely unaware of where it has been. But if matter itself, at certain dimensional levels, can retain a permanent physical memory of its movements, how much of your physical form is secretly scarred by where you've been? What if the universe is quietly keeping a physical record of every interaction, storing the history of existence in the very geometry of particles? You might not just be remembering your past, your physical matter might actually be shaped by it. The idea that particles have a persistent memory of their history is deeply unsettling. But what if there are particles that refuse to interact with history or anything else at all? The gallium anomaly. Imagine shining a high-powered flashlight directly at a solid brick wall. You know exactly what should happen. The light will hit the surface, illuminate the brick, and completely stop. The physical barrier prevents the energy from passing through. Now imagine something vastly more elusive. An endless, invisible stream of subatomic particles raining down from the cosmos, passing straight through the dense iron core of the Earth, slicing through the concrete foundation of your house, and flowing silently through your own body, all without ever touching a single atom of your being. You wouldn't feel them. You couldn't see them. They would exist perfectly alongside you, completely indifferent to your physical reality. For decades, physicists have known about these ghostly particles, known as neutrinos. But recently, a terrifying mathematical discrepancy has emerged in our most advanced observations, suggesting that the ghosts themselves have a shadow. This deep crisis in modern physics is known as the gallium anomaly. To understand the sheer scale of the problem, we have to look at extreme underground laboratories where scientists use massive, shielded vats of liquid gallium to catch standard neutrinos. Based on our absolute best models of the sun's nuclear fusion and quantum mechanics, we know exactly how many neutrinos should be colliding with those detectors. But in the early 2020s, the best collaboration published data revealing a massive, undeniable failure in our understanding of the universe. The detectors are recording significantly fewer neutrinos than the standard models dictate. The math simply doesn't align. The particles are vanishing into nowhere, and the most highly probable explanation for this missing data is the existence of a theoretical entity called a sterile neutrino. Unlike a regular neutrino, which only rarely interacts with normal matter, a sterile neutrino is hypothesized to interact with absolutely nothing. It is a particle completely divorced from the fundamental forces of electromagnetism, the strong nuclear force, and the weak nuclear force. It only communicates with our reality through gravity, meaning it moves through our universe as if we fundamentally do not exist. You naturally assume the universe you see, the one you can touch, smell, and measure, is the complete picture of reality. You walk around believing that your physical body is a primary feature of the cosmos, but the statistical probability of sterile neutrinos suggests that an entire shadow reality is layered perfectly over our own. There could be an infinite amount of invisible matter, perhaps entirely complex, untouchable structures, passing right through you at this very second. If massive, foundational chunks of the universe can slip through your body without leaving a single trace, it forces a devastating question about your own significance. Are you the concrete reality? Or are you just a fragile, temporary construct floating in a universe that doesn't even notice you are there? You might be entirely surrounded by a vast, silent world you are biologically incapable of perceiving. A shadow reality slipping through us undetected is a chilling thought, but the true terror of the void is what happens when absolutely nothing is there at all. The Casimir effect. Picture a completely empty room. You remove all the furniture, scrape the paint off the walls, and painstakingly pump out absolutely all the air. You block every single stray photon of light, and you build a lead shield thick enough to block out all background cosmic radiation. Once you have forcefully removed every atom and every wave of energy, you would naturally assume the room is entirely empty. You have created a perfect, flawless void filled with absolutely nothing. Now imagine you place two perfectly uncharged, perfectly flat metal plates very close together inside that absolute vacuum. Logic, intuition, and classical physics all dictate that they should just sit there, frozen in the stillness of the nothingness. Instead, an invisible, unexplained force grips them. They begin to push toward each other, drawn together by a sudden physical pressure that appears to be generated by the completely empty space itself. This impossible phenomenon is called the Casimir effect, and it was physically measured and rigorously verified by physicist Steve Lamoureux in 1997. To explain why two uncharged plates would spontaneously attract each other in a perfect vacuum, we have to abandon the comforting idea that nothing actually exists. When we investigate quantum field theory, we discover that there is no such thing as empty space. What we casually perceive as a blank void is actually a chaotic, boiling ocean of quantum fluctuations. Virtual particles are continuously popping in and out of existence, violently borrowing energy from the universe for a fraction of a microsecond, before annihilating each other back into nothingness. When you place two metal plates incredibly close together, you restrict the possible wavelengths of the virtual particles that can manifest between them. But on the outside of the plates, the infinite void is still boiling with particles of all sizes and frequencies. The result is a measurable, undeniable physical pressure, pushing inward on the plates from the outside. The vacuum itself is exerting a crushing force. You think of empty space as a harmless canvas, a peaceful, blank theater where the daily events of your life take place. You assume that when nothing is happening, nothing is there. But the Casimir effect proves that the very concept of emptiness is a naive biological illusion. The space between your fingers, the empty air in your silent bedroom, the vast, dark void of the cosmos, none of it is truly empty. It is a violent, churning engine of continuous creation and destruction, constantly boiling with phantom energy that is entirely undetectable to your limited human senses. You are not walking through a calm, quiet world. You are wading through an invisible, pressurized ocean of chaotic quantum violence. Nothingness isn't a lack of matter. It is a highly pressurized system that is quietly waiting. If the empty vacuum of space is chaotic enough to create physical particles out of nothing, then the final anomaly isn't just a violation of space. It is a complete, irreversible shattering of time itself. The tachyon particle. Imagine standing at the edge of a perfectly still pond. You pick up a heavy rock and hurl it directly into the water. You know the exact, unbreakable sequence of events that must inevitably follow. Your arm moves, the rock flies through the air, it violently breaks the surface of the water, and only then does the splash occur. Cause always rigidly precedes effect. That is the fundamental arrow of time that governs every single moment of your existence. But imagine looking at the pond and suddenly seeing the splash happen first. A sudden, inexplicable eruption of water occurs, and then the rock flies backward, up out of the pond, and perfectly into your waiting hand. In our standard reality, this is a hallucination. But in the extreme, mathematical fringes of theoretical physics, there is a strict necessity that actually demands this exact sequence of events. These reality-breaking entities are known as tachyon particles. In standard physics, we are taught that the speed of light in a vacuum is the absolute, unbreakable cosmic speed limit. Nothing with mass can ever accelerate fast enough to reach it, let alone surpass it. But tachyons are theoretical particles that are mathematically required by certain advanced string theories in order to correctly balance complex cosmic equations. And their singular, defining characteristic is that they always, permanently move faster than light. They can never slow down to sublight speeds. Because they permanently exceed the cosmic speed limit, the complex mathematics of relativity dictate a terrifying, mind-bending consequence. They would experience time in reverse. A tachyon created in a distant supernova tomorrow would travel backward through time, arriving here on Earth yesterday. If you could somehow interact with a tachyon, you would physically perceive its effect long before its cause even happened. It is a particle bleeding into our present moment from a future that has already solidly occurred, flowing backward against the current of time. You believe with absolute certainty that the future is unwritten and the past is unchangeable. You navigate your entire life assuming time flows smoothly in one predictable direction, granting you the free will to make choices that actively shape your destiny. But if tachyons truly exist, they completely obliterate the comforting concept of an open, undecided future. If particles are successfully traveling backward into our present from events that haven't even happened yet, it implies a universe where destiny is a rigid, undeniable physical mechanism. It heavily suggests that the future is just as permanent and rigidly fixed as the past, and you are simply moving blindly forward through a timeline that has already been completely finalized. Your deep feeling of free will might just be a complex biological illusion, a trick of consciousness playing out as you blindly recite a script that was written long before you were even born. If you think physics is deceiving you now, you haven't seen anything yet. The anomalies we've covered today are just the surface level of a much deeper, more terrifying system. Click the video on your screen right now to uncover every mind-blowing coincidence, glitch and paradox that proves reality is broken. I'll see you there.